Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa Allah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa Allah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا
الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله ذي الملك والملكوت ذي العزة والجبروت. الحمد لله حي قيوم لا ينام، عزيز لا يضام، قهار لا يرام. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. O you who believe, fear Allah as He should be feared, and die not except on the state of Islam. For may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most merciful, grant us the gift of dying on state of Islam. Allahumma ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Amma ba'd. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Mutaffifin, ألا يظن أولئك أنهم مبعوثون ليوم عظيم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this great reminder talking about the mutaffifin, those who are cheating, those who are dealing, twisting the measures, but in the general those who do not really adhere to the rightful guidance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala قال ألا يظن أولئك أنهم مبعوثون. Are they not thinking that they're going to be resurrected? ليوم عظيم, to a tremendous day. And what makes this day tremendous? What makes this day to be great? The greatest of all the days. قال يوم يقوم الناس لرب العالمين. The day when people stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The standing before Allah is what makes this day to be great. What makes this day to be عظيم, tremendous. And it is a reality for every believer who really they want to honor themselves, to ask themselves and to ask ourselves. This يوم عظيم, this great day, are we ready for it? قال يوم يقوم الناس لرب العالمين. So the whole humankind is going to be standing before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Standing, shaken, scared, and they're going to be fearing the judgment. Fearing to be just beside or before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of the universe, the creator of everyone. He knows everything subhanahu wa ta'ala, and no one can hide anything. قَالَ يَوْمَ تُعْرَضُونَ لَا تَخْفَى مِنْكُمْ خَائِفَةٌ. The way that the day that you're going to be exposed, you cannot hide anything. Nothing is hidden from you. And this is a believer thinking about it. how you're going to be reflecting your own action, your own standing today to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the same is going to be reflected in the hereafter. The more eagerness, the more longing you have in this dunya toward reaching the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will have it reflected in the akhirah. Therefore, the way you want to be in the akhirah need to be reflected into your action, into your dunya. So the day which is asirun, asir, very difficult, very difficult. The Prophet ﷺ قال يوم يقوم الناس لرب العالمين قال صلى الله عليه وسلم قال يغيب أحدهم في رشحه إلى أنفاس أذنيه. He said the day when Allah subhanahu, when everyone, the whole humankind stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that day you'll see people submerge into their own sweat to the half of their ears. Can you imagine such a thing, such a reality that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing in His book, and the Prophet ﷺ give us more details? This is all of us who are going to be in that day. No one can be, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala قال استجيبوا لربكم من قبل أن يأتي يوم لا مرد له من الله. Answer the call of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before a day it comes. There is no averting to this day. There is no turning away this day. There is no anyone who can avoid it. لا مرد له ما لكم من ملجأ. You do not have any way, no refuge. قال كلا لا وزر إلى ربك يومئذ مستقر. Nay, there is no refuge, there is no fleeing, there is no escape. To Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala everyone is going back. Therefore, you standing that day is going to define all your entire journey of existence. And that entire journey of existence is reflected today into your action. Reflected today how you stand for the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how you face yourself, how you interact with the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As no one is going to be missing. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked and reminded this disbeliever, said, are they not thinking that they're going to be resurrected? You believe that you're going to be resurrected. Are they not going to think that going to standing before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the tremendous day? You believe in it. So why we do not act upon such a thing that is certain that is going to happen? Why someone is losing himself? Why someone is getting, subhanAllah, in a situation to be in a very difficult way, a difficult situation, if you do not act accordingly, according to your iman? For this reason, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala قال فَأَقِمْ وَجْهَكَ لِلدِّينِ الْقَيِّمِ مِنْ قَبْلِ أَنْ يَأْتِيَ يَوْمٌ لَا مَرَدَّ لَهُ مِنَ اللَّهِ. Stand for the sake of Allah. Face your face and behaving and conduct according to the upright deen, al-Islam. من قبل أن يأتي, before a day will come. No one, there will not be any turning away from that day. No one will be missed. No one. لا مرد يومئذ يصدعون. Everybody is going to be divided in two groups. People that are going to be taken into the rahmah of Allah, and the other والعياذ بالله be cast in hellfire. Those who deserve and earn with their own hands, with their own deeds, the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the other ayah قال فأقم وجهك للدين حنيفا. Stand and face your face to the religion which is Hanifa. Hanifa, inclined from the falsehood and focusing and getting into the uprightness. Hanifa. Fitrat Allah, the inner disposition upon which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created His creation. Therefore, to help ourselves truly, we have to study the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How do you want to be in that day? How do you want to be your state in that day when you're going to stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? You want to be safe. Therefore, check yourself and how you are standing today for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Your day that you're going to stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how your life is standing toward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As from those people who's inactive, crippled by their dreams, illusion, crippled by, subhanAllah, their heedlessness, away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then we have that all aspiration that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to forgive us. We are faking ourselves. We are lying to ourselves. Because no such a thing happened without your action, without your determination. So the first ayah in Surah, and both of them are in Surah Rum. So stand and face your face toward the deen that is Hanif, Fitrat Allahi, which is recommending us to think about this path of Hanifiyah. Path of Hanifiyah. The second one is to help yourself and be serious, devoted before the days come, is warning from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which obligating on us to conduct ourselves or to behave ourselves according to the inner disposition or the deen of the inner disposition of the humankind, which is Al-Islam. Now, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, answer the call, istajibu lillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala, before this day will come. So to help ourselves answering, so we'll find our situation or ourselves in a situation that inshallah will be preparing ourselves to the abode of safety, It is to first to protect and safeguard our inner disposition, al-fitrah. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala qala fitrat Allah allati fatara an-nas alayha. So stand and face yourself and be upright on the deen that the deen of al-fitrah, the deen of this fitrah. So subhanallah, the preservation and the safeguarding of the fitrah is a necessity for every believer. Why? Because without it you will not be able to understand or to embrace the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because the fitrah is like that stage of preparedness of the heart, so to will be able to receive and adhere and embrace the guidance of the heaven, the divine guidance. Without it, if it's corrupted, subhanallah, the perception is corrupted, so people, they see the light of the Quran as darkness. Why? Because they have that inner disposition who has been corrupted. Therefore, the preservation of the fitrah is a necessity. We'll not say a necessity that we have to do it. No, it is innate in us. Without it, we cannot be, subhanallah, or like be steadfast on the way of Allah. Impossible. We're going to be deviated. We're going to be acting in a way like a form. We're not doing the true way of the guidance. We're not adhering to the way of Allah or the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ. We think that we are. And in reality, the fitrah, the inner disposition that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the pure, it might be also be altered, and the alteration and how it be spoiled by two things, as the scholar they say, at-talaqi wa-ta'awudu. At-talaqi, what embracing or invading our mind, whatever crooked values are instilled in our soul. So those external influences, those subhanallah corrupt the fitrah. The second aspect is the habit. People, they get into habit, and that habit, they get to it, subhanallah, they embrace it, it becomes their own inner disposition. And that's those two elements who corrupt the fitrah. Can someone restore it? It's actually an obligation to restore it. It's actually an obligation to correct it. That's why safeguarding the fitrah will help you to receive and embrace the divine guidance. So how someone can do it is in a very simple way. Is to fulfill the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How fulfilling the command of Allah and abiding to the command of Allah correct your fitrah, correct your inner disposition, because the command of Allah has been edified based on the sound fitrah. It's not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who created the fitrah. Therefore, He make His legislation, He make His divine guidance based on this fitrah. So if we have a corrupted inner disposition, the fact to follow exactly the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ and the teaching of the Quran, it will correct our fitrah. So this is granted. However, the believer, when we get into the safeguarding of the fitrah and making the path which is the Hanifiyah. So what is the Hanifiyah? He is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called فَأَقِمْ وَجْهَكَ لِلدِّينِ حَنِيفًا. And all of this, as to summarize, to remind ourselves, is how to have an image or concept in this life that will reflect a safe standing before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you see, it's an obligation on every believer, because if you're really concerned about yourself and then you want to be safe the day when everyone will be standing before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you have to work on this element. Now, the Hanifiyah is that action of striving to, subhanallah, to incline, to avoid the falsehood. So you see, the Hanifiyah, it's really a beautiful word and very profound, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here said the Hanifa, it's not to persevere on the uprightness. No, it's to avoid any falsehood which make you persevering on the uprightness. So when you focus on your uprightness, you might be deviated in a way that you will not be aware of it. But when you focus on the crookedness and on the falsehood, so you have to avoid it in your path. That's how you guarantee to yourself the righteousness and the uprightness on your path. So that's what is Hanifan. That's the concept of Hanif. And the Hanif and the Hanifiyya, or the path of the Hanifiyya, its basis and the foundation is truthfulness, is a sidq. However, if we want to safeguard our fitrah, one aspect, then by getting into the path of the Hanifiyya, which is the constant, persistent, sincere striving, avoiding all falsehood, so we will be able to be on the path of uprightness, require one crucial element, which is the determination, al-azim. The determination to do it. Because without determination, we're going to be passive, we're going to be dormant, we're going to be people, subhanAllah, who always postpone things. So this determination becomes that necessary element into the life of the believer, so he will be able to get and embark onto the path of the Hanifi. So this determination, which is this azimah, this power in the heart that is like a willpower, will driving you to do the good. This power in the heart, subhanAllah, how is manifested or should be manifested into our way? The manifestation of this determination is by a word called al-qiyam. So what is al-qiyam? Is to stand. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called aqim wajhak. Aqim wajhak is like literally stand your face toward Allah's, divine guidance. So that's standing, which is opposite to heedless, opposite to sit, opposite to be dormant. So there's initiative, there's activity, there's being proactive, being driven toward, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is the determination, that is the azm. How is manifested? Is manifested by al-qiyam. So the qiyam need to be that, marked element in the life of a believer that marked all the entirety of his action and her action. So in everything you do, you check yourself, are you standing for it or lazy or inclined from it? And this is, subhanAllah, the qiyam. So when you say the standing before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the standing for the sake of Allah is manifested by the prostration of your heart to Allah. The standing to comply with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala command is to fulfill His command. Why? Because you want to soak your heart with the divine guidance. That's the purpose of it. Then it comes the standing for the sake of the truth, for the sake of Allah's deen, which it comes by enjoining the good and proclaiming the truth and defining or, subhanAllah, forbidden evil, which is going to help you. This is like a proof of your truthfulness of your iman, because if you don't enjoy good and forbid evil, which is mean you are not true to the faith that you have in your heart. So this element of standing, which marks the entirety of the action of the believers. These, if you look closely to the life of Ibrahim alayhi salam, you find him alayhi salam that he fulfilled them in their entirety with the high level of excellence. When Ibrahim alayhi salam, we're talking about his heart standing for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He praised Ibrahim by said, and he came to his Lord with a sound heart that he's prostrating fully, completely to Allah. Then when it comes to standing for the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the standing, it's like a metaphoric way, like standing, you are in it, you have that proactive enthusiasm, driven, and have this power, a powerful angel that taking you toward what you want to achieve. That is the standing. Then the standing for, subhanAllah, for the truth, look what he did, alayhi salam, with his people, to the point that they want to punish him by throwing in the fire, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved him, as you know. The standing for all the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you see how Ibrahim, he submitted to a command that he saw in a dream, and he has his son to be, subhanAllah, face down to go ahead and slaughter him, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stopped him. So he fulfilled the standing for Allah in all its aspect in complete way and in perfect and excellent way. And that's why he is Musliman Hanifan. قال ما كان إبراهيم يهوديا ولا نصرانيا. Ibrahim, he was not a Jew or Christian. قال ولكن كان حنيفا, he was a Muslim, حنيفا مسلما, حنيفا, this is the path of the Hanifi, because the standing point and the foundation of the Hanifiyya is the truthfulness, Now, how this determination of Ibrahim has been manifested to be for us an example is amazing. Is when Ibrahim alayhi salam was ordained to raise the foundation of the Kaaba, to raise the wall of the Kaaba, from its foundation, he didn't just did what he has all been ordained. He brought a big stone and he get on the stone so he can, willing and intending to have to rise the highest possible that he can, the wall of the Kaaba. And this is the manifestation of determination for Ibrahim to teach us that the worship of Allah is not done into, subhanallah, into as a form without a soul. He did it with love, he did it with devotion, he did it with humbleness, he did it with determination. That is, subhanAllah, the manifestation of the determination of the path of the Hanifiyya that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to follow his path. ثُمَّ أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ أَنِ اتَّبِعْ مِلَّةَ, the way of Ibrahim Hanif. And amazingly, this stone who became a miracle for the believers to the end of time, Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said, should we not take a place or prayer, a place or the site of the standing of Ibrahim, Maqam Ibrahim? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fulfilled what Umar requested. قال واتخذوا من مقام إبراهيم مصلى في قراءة نافع. And they took from the standing place of Ibrahim a site of prayer. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us in the other way, وَاتَّخِذُوا, and take from the standing place of Ibrahim a place of site of prayer. Which when you combine them both, you find the companion of the one Allah ta'ala alayhim, they took Ibrahim as a role model for the love of the worship, for the love of Allah, for that determination to always be standing for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, standing to do better, standing to be greater, standing and greater in a way, not in the way of the people of this worldly life, or the people who follow the love of the desire, no, to be greater in doing the good, to be greater in humbleness, to be greater in conduct, to be greater in behavior, to be greater in piety and righteousness. And this is, subhanallah, every time you see the Kaaba or you go to the Kaaba, you look at Maqam Ibrahim to remind yourself that your life needs to have this determination that drive you, like Ibrahim, to do the worship with love, to do with the worship with devotion. And that action itself is going to reflect the way you're going to standing before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Day of Judgment. That's how Ibrahim is going to be standing. He's standing at the front of the Most Merciful. Why? Because of his determination that he fulfilled, and he has the entirety of his action to have this character of standing for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And look at the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how Allah guided his Prophet. The first thing after receiving the revelation, he been ordained to standing the whole night for prayer. That's to have him that ability to have a whole heart be prostrated to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's how it built the great personality to become the best pious, the best worshipper, the best servant ever in the whole entire humankind, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, by standing. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala قال قُمْ فَأَنذِرْ, the second surah that he received after the first revelation, he received Al-Muzammil, to build the personality and have the heart to be fully submitted and prostrating to Allah. And the second surah to stand for Allah, to call for Allah, to convey for the message. قُمْ فَأَنذِرْ وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبَّرْ, and glorify your Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it becomes the life all for Allah, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and striving for his sake subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's how the characteristic of a believer need to be, by standing. And if you do such a standing, then you're going to have a safe standing before Allah. Because the safe standing before Allah in the Day of Judgment, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might advance to you the reward even when you are here in this life. Therefore, you're not going to see any of this fear. You're not going to see any of this terrifying aspect of this day. قال إن الذين سبقت لهم منا الحسنى أولئك عنها مبعدون. Those who the good reward has been advanced to them, they will be far, far removed from all this terrifying aspect in the day of judgment and from the sound of hellfire. Wal-iyadhu billah, they will be far from it. Therefore, you have the key today. Why not you work for it? Why not? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He described the people of the cave, He described it with one element, with that determination, what's standing. Because if they didn't have that azm, then they will be adherent to their people, say, you know, what we can do? We cannot do anything. This is our parents following, you know, this crooked aliha. What we can do? But they did. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala قال إنهم فتية آمنوا بربهم وزدناهم هدى وربطنا على قلوبهم. They believed and increased them in guidance, and we strengthened their hearts. After that, what He said, قال إذ قاموا. You see, the standing. Standing does not mean let stand. Stand, your heart is standing with the bravery, with courage, with determination, with the love of the truth, with the love of standing for the truth, to sacrificing for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the meaning of the standing. Even in Arafah, we said, يوم وقف عرفة, the standing. Most of the people, they're sitting, but the standing is an aspect, metaphorical way to say that you are standing for the sake of Allah, because the standing is a khudu'. أَمَنْ هُوَ قَانِتٌ أَنَاءَ اللَّيْلِ سَاجِدًا وَقَائِمًا. Can you be like these people who are far from Allah subhanahu, like the one who's in devotion, standing for Allah, into sujood and into qiyam during the night? Very big difference. These are the people of knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, هَلْ يَسْتَوِي الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُونَ وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. So the people of the cave, their aspect to help them to be a Quran, their story to become a Quran, is that aspect of standing. And where are you from this standing? All of us. All of us. You know, if we want to really grow the seed of this standing to become, you know, the marking point in the entirety of our action, to have that initiative, initiating the good, to run, to race for the good, and all of it stand for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it requires one aspect, is how much you are certain that you're going to meet Allah. How much you are certain. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, when He describing the believer, قَالَ وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ بِالْآخِرَةِ يُوقِنُونَ. And those who, they believe in with certainty in the hereafter. What does it mean to believe certainty? Because all of us will believe in the hereafter. All of us will believe in meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But how much you truly believe that what you're doing here is going to be reflected exactly when you're going to be in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Which is mean, if you are lazy here, you're not going to be safe there. If you are heedless here, you're not going to be aware what's going to happen, because you're going to be far from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, al-iqanu, this certainty, this yaqeen, this certitude is when you think about it. Like Ibrahim alayhi salam, he's standing on the stone, to, subhanAllah, out of devotion, out of love. Look, Ibrahim is going to stand as the Imam, as the friend of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَاتَّخَذَ اللَّهُ إِبْرَاهِيمَ خَلِيلًا. And Allah took Ibrahim as a friend. The same, likewise, for the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Now, al-yaqeenu, how can we check how much certitude we have in the belief of the hereafter? Is when you stand in the prayer. And that's the biggest test. The more distracted you are in the prayer, the less yaqeen you have in the akhirah. It's full, simple equation. Because when you are in the prayer, you're standing before Allah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before the prayer, what He's telling you, hayya al-falah, come to success. And we are standing distracted, which is mean we don't care about the success. Not literally, but because we are heedless, subhanallah. Therefore, if we are aware of such a thing and we make a standing, when you say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, come to success, hayya al-falah, and you're standing and you're striving. You know, when you strive every salah to help yourself be focused, you might not have focus, but just by striving, that's when you start to get reward in your prayer. Did you know that? Because when you do pray and you just fulfill the condition, and you do all the requirement of the prayer from wajibat and pillars, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not hold you accountable for it, but you are not rewarded for it. unless you'll bring that focus, unless you strive to have focus. Therefore, non-striving, being neglectful, being heedless, means that in reality we do not have certitude, because the certitude in something, it's like you work for it as you have it in your hand. If someone, for example, telling you, if you go on this side, you're going to be hurt. There's someone who might, hurt you. You're not going to go if you are certain. But if you're not certain, you said, whatever. And then you're going to get hurt. Then you realize that what he's being told, it was certain thing. This is exactly the same. This is exactly the same. So you standing in the prayer is the way how to give you the sign how much certitude you have in the akhirah. And this is what is going to help you building step by step, because when the more focus you have the prayer, the more standing you have to Allah, the more determination you are building, the more inclining from the falsehood and focus on the Hanafi. It builds. And that's why the key is in your hand. For one thing, dear brother, respected sister, very simple, if you want to build the certitude, is to study the Quran. Just to study the Quran, read it. Read it with your heart. Read it with an attentive ear. Why we are not scared when we read about the hellfire? We pass through the ayat. No, we should be scared. Because the Prophet ﷺ, he himself, whenever he read this ayat, he's seeking the refuge with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the doom of the hellfire. But we feel like we are safe. It's either we are not reading, or we are very absent-minded, or when you read and you feel like, alhamdulillah, we are Muslim. No, actually the Muslims are the one who has to fear the most from the punishment of the hellfire, because they know it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, look, I finished with these 3 ayat. The first ayah is from the Quran. Of course, قال إن في ذلك لآية لمن خاف عذاب الآخرة. All Surah Hud, all the stories of the Prophet, all the story of the struggle, of the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to them. He said, in this is a reminder, is a sign for only the people, for the who fear the hereafter. Therefore, to really build that sidq, that truthfulness, we have to take that warning of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala seriously. It has to interact into our heart, to have an effect into our heart. قال إن في ذلك, so we only be reminded and have to reflect on the signs of Surah Hud only if we fear the akhirah. The other ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فذكر بالقرآن من يخاف وعيد. So remind with the Quran for those who fear the warning, which is mean if you do not fear the warning, the Quran will not help you, will not remind you, will not have any effect in you. And the other ayah, the empowerment of the believer on the land to establish justice only will come if we fear the standing before Allah. Allah said in Surah Ibrahim, قَالَ وَلَنُسْكِنَنَّكُمُ الْأَرْضِ, we'll have you to empower you and have you to dwell on the earth, which is give you a قَالَ ذَلِكَ, and this will be for everyone, لِمَنْ خَافَ مَقَامِي وَخَافَ وَعِيدِ, the one who feared the standing before me and in fearing the warning of Allah. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على النبي المصطفى أما بعد. Dear brother, respected sister, standing before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a tremendous day. And Allah said it. It's a day that one will be, subhanallah, قال حفاة, barefooted, عراة, naked, غرلا, the way you've been, subhanallah, born. Even the Sayyidah Aisha was so shocked. She said, Ya Rasulullah, how can we be like that? He said, Ya Aisha, this is, everyone is busy with their own things, their own affairs, with their own things. It's something that you cannot even describe. Subhanallah. So being in this state, dear brother, respected sister, the key of salvation, the key of get safety or be safe at that day is today. The way you stand to Allah in that day will be the right image of the way you're standing today here in the dunya. If you are heedless, not caring, negligent, So you're going to be, subhanAllah, losing all those elements of safety that Allah gave to you. So the Hanafiya, to have the intention to be inclined from all falsehood to get on uprightness, this is the beginning of the striving, which is good with the help of Allah to build in you that determination of al-azm. And the azm will help you to market all your action with the qiyam, standing, initiating, enthusiasm. Why? Because you know that you're going to meet Allah. Certainly. Where you know, you read it in the Quran. So you interact. You don't need books of tafsir. You just interact with the book of Allah. Land, subhanAllah, an attentive ear and have a heart that conceives and perceives. And inshaAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help you. And all of that is found in one element to finish. Is to appreciate the gift of Allah. Because if you do not appreciate the gift, then it will not be difficult for us to understand what is certainty from what is doubtful. And what is this gift? It's the gift of the Iman and the gift of the Quran. Wallahi, Allah gave you the Iman that who made you to know Allah, and give you the Quran that who made you to know what is going to be your journey of existence. For this reason, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, قُلْ بِفَضْلِ اللَّهِ وَبِرَحْمَتِهِ فَبِذَلِكَ يَفْرَحُوا. Say with the bounty of Allah and His mercy that they should be rejoicing. The bounty of Allah and His mercy are both Al-Iman wal-Quran, the faith and the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what you should be rejoicing. This is what you should be celebrating. Don't you see that our Eid, both Eid are celebrating faith and Quran? This is what we rejoice. So why we don't continue to rejoice them in the rest of the year? We rejoice them in Ramadan and we rejoice them during the Eid al-Adha, but we are heedless toward them in the rest of the year. And this is the beginning of building this determination to restructure and redo your standing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be safe in the day when everyone will stand before Allah. يَوْمَ يَقُومُ النَّاسُ لِرَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. There will not be any escape. لَا مَفَرَّ يَوْمَئِذٍ وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. فنسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى أن يثبتنا على صراط المستقيم ويرزقنا الصدق ويرزقنا الطاعة ويرزقنا السمع والطاعة. اللهم آت قلوبنا تقواها وزكها أنت خير من زكاها أنت وليها ومولاها. اللهم يا أرحم الراحمين ويا رب العالمين أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا أجمعين وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. اللهم ارحم إخواننا في غزة وفلسطين. اللهم ارفع عنهم الغم. اللهم أفرغ عليهم صبرا وثبت أقدامهم وانصرهم على المعتدين الضالين. إنك على كل شيء قدير وبالإجابة جدير. نعم المولى ونعم النصير. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. وأقم الصلاة.